So again, this is our second international Hamilton Hang. So Dafi, we're so excited that you joined us today. And if you don't know Dafi, he's a Swiss designer. He works with both analog and digital techniques. He produces very fresh designs. They're unique. A lot of beautiful letterpress printed posters. We've been very lucky that you've visited us multiple times. You've done residencies here. You were one of our new impressions, our juried exhibition jurors, and we've been able to share your work. And you do a really good job. He does a really good job of pushing boundaries, composition, and really kind of playing with what it means to be a contemporary letterpress designer. So without further ado, I'm going to unmute you. I just made you a little quiet. And so I'm going to let you take it over. It allowed me to mute you. There we go. Okay, so Dafi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah. Oh wait, now we're on double microphone again. Shit. Do you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right. Okay, so much about digital technologies. So welcome to my studio. It's actually, yeah, well, it's the opposite than what I do normally. Normally I would go to a conference or talk somewhere. This is so much quicker, so much nicer, but we're missing some of the direct interaction, of course. But the cool thing is, you can come and see me at my studio this time, which you normally couldn't do. So that's the big plus. I can show you around. I can show you some of my processes that I've been working on recently. For this presentation, I'm going to show you first some work that I've been doing lately. Then I'm going to be talking about some of the struggles and what's been on my plate during the time of coronavirus. And at the end, I'm going to give you a preview of the newest episode of my educational videos, the Dafi Kühne printing show. So that's actually going to be released on Sunday, but you're going to see it today. So stay tuned for that. So I've been a full-time letterpress printer or full-time designer and letterpress printer for about 11 years now. I've been in the studio for 11 years, but it really, it grew a lot in the time I've been here. So I started with one room on this floor. I'm on the second floor in an old factory. I started with one room on this floor, and I expanded it to 4 rooms. It's now about 400 square meters, which doesn't mean much to the people from the US, but for the people from Europe. Okay, 400 square meters. That's that. So it is a lot of space, and it is a lot of equipment that I have here working on my own. But you really have to be aware that letterpress equipment still is really cheap in Europe and in Switzerland. So the stuff I have here, and it's about 30 tons of stuff right now, is all basically from scratch. So let's jump in with the first project, and we can switch to this camera maybe. This is a poster I've been working on. Let me hold it up a little bit. Yeah, let me. No shit, sorry, I'm too low. I'll go up a little bit. So this has been is a poster I've made for Tipoteca, the museum in Italy, and they turned 25. So I used all the numbers from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 24, super compressed, super stretched horizontally, and then the 25 at the bottom. This has been a regular lino cut. You can see the cut here in the back. Let me bring it to the front. So you can see it's quite a big lino cut. It's just, let's say, a conventional lino cut. So it's nothing special here, just a transfer. I think with acetone, I did the transfer of the laser print I had, did the layout digitally, I transferred it, and then I'll cut it by hand. The good thing about a cut like this is you can always exchange some numbers because it's not connected. So if I have a miscut in one number, which I did probably here, you can see I can change some of the numbers individually. Well, as Stephanie said before, a lot of the designs I do are somehow done with the computer, but also there's a lot of the stuff that I do manually. So it's always a back and forth process between the computer and the letterpress printing press. But what is very central for my job is that I do not deliver any digital design only. So this doesn't happen. So I do design digitally, but then there's always some letterpress printing involved. So there's never a PDF that leaves my studio just as a final product. There might be a PDF involved in the process where I'm sending a sketch to the client and I'm hearing back, but there's no PDF as a final product. And I do this because if I start, I think, or I believe, if I start sharing or making PDFs or making offset prints also, and also making digital layouts only, I will end up just making digital layouts. And that's not what I want to do. Because if a client says like, you know, last time was great that you did this letterpress printed poster, but this time, can you also deliver a digital sketch because we want to make Facebook invitations? And I'll go, oh, sure. And then next time they say, no, this time the budget is short, so can we also, or can we just do the digital layout? And then from then on, you know where it's going. So that's why I decided that I'm only doing design in the connection with letterpress print. I'm going to go to the next project. This is a poster I did for an exhibition. Let me come over here. For an exhibition where some architects worked with the two most sold chairs in history. It started with this chair, which is the toned bentwood chair. I mean, you can see probably, you know, this kind of chair is the most sold and most produced chair from 1860s until the 1960s. Then this chair, it's normally not orange, but you can see the proportions, and you definitely know this chair. A kind of cheap chair as we see it today, but was a designer chair and was quite expensive when it was produced the first time, but today is one of the cheapest chair. This chair costs €2.50 in production, and it has 2.5 kilograms of plastic. So it's nothing. It takes 2 seconds to produce, and it's been the most produced chair since the 1960s. And these architects that did an exhibition in Paris that I made this poster for, the architects work with a fusion and want to take the best of both qualities of these chairs. And that's what this poster was for. It is printed on green paper. As you can see, it's a very, it's a natural paper that soaks up a lot of ink. I had to print 2 hits of white, and then 2 hits of orange, 2 hits of blue, and then 4 hits for the small white type to make it covering that much. Can you see this? Oh, sorry, it's a shadow, but you can see the type. So, a total of 14 hits to print this poster. The thing technically that I think is interesting about this poster, that I started to combine manual cut linoleum. So this is basically the shape. And you can see on this shape, you can see the wicker weaving that this chair has. That is laser cut. So it's a combination of both worlds. It's partly laser cut and partly hand cut. I like the imperfection of the curves if I manually cut that. But I would not want to cut the wicker weaving, and I'm showing it to you on the poster. So on the wicker weaving, there's 2 hits of white and 2 hits of blue. You can watch better photos of all of my posters on my webpage. So if you really want to see the details, I really encourage you to visit my webpage.
And I shared that link, and somebody had a question about how much time between hits of white.
Well, I use foil ink for that. Foil ink is the ink that you can use to print on plastic or vinyl stickers and whatever that they use in offset printing. So I use foil ink for that, and I use a product called Speedy Dry, which is the best dryer. I've tried many, but this is really the best, and you can get it in the States also. So I use Speedy Dry, and I use foil ink, 20% of dryers, and then I can do 4 hours. After 4 hours, the white is totally dry. But you cannot leave the press inked while going to get a sandwich for lunch. So that doesn't work. So you need to wash the press within 50 minutes. If you have 20% of Speedy Dry, you have 50 minutes, and that's set on an alarm clock, and then you need to wash it down. Even if you're not finished, you wash the press down, and then you re-ink it. So it takes a while, but with these tricks, I can work much faster.
Yeah, and what press are you printing that on?
I might show you the press later. It's a large graphics proof press. These posters are 100 centimeters in length. So that's around, I don't know, 41 or 42 inches. So they're quite big for letterpress, and you need a big press. So it's a proof press, basically. And
what edition are you doing on that?
That was a small edition. That was around 100, maybe even less. Maybe
is 100 small for you? What are you normally doing?
Yeah,
I know each project's
small.
Different.
It is small. A normal edition would be around 500, and a large edition would be between 1,500, maybe 2,000. Mm-hmm. And I make the same, or put in the same efforts if I make a large edition. So if it's 14 runs, I have to decide while I'm designing. That's a thing that is really important for me, that if I write a quote to a client and they ask me, hey, how much does it cost to print 500 posters? I don't know how many print runs I will use because I don't know what the design will look like. So I just have to take an average price, and I will find out if the client has a big budget or a small budget. But then from then on, I have to, while I'm designing it, I have to always think like, is it gonna work with the budget? And since here the edition was quite small, I think to print the 80 or whatever posters I did for this edition, it took me like 20 minutes. It was just a lot of work of letting them dry and then come back. So I had to make sure I find a good process of having something else that I can work on in the meantime while we dry.
Do you mind if we ask one more ink question? I know you have a lot to share, but there's a lot of interest in your process. One of the questions is specifically, what is foil ink?
So foil ink is offset ink that you can use to print on a totally closed surface. So the whole drying will go out in the air and not into the substrate. Normal ink, and I don't know exactly what you're using, but normal ink does both. So it does a little bit of absorbing in the substrate, in the paper, and a little bit of evaporating in the air. But if you're printing on vinyl stickers, for example, nothing will get soaked up by the stickers because the surface is closed. So basically with foil ink, you can print on any closed surface. And it's regular offset ink that I use for something like this.
Yeah, we use just oil-based ink that dries by oxidation, that we can use on coated paper. Oh, but Jim's telling me it's oil-based on steroids, complete oxidation.
Okay. But can you, if you put a bit of oil-based ink on glass, will it dry completely the next day?
Not by the next day. Yeah, Jim made a little note. He said oil based on steroids, complete oxidation. So, and Matt saying it's maybe like tough text. Okay, cool. Well, no, that's good. We're helping. That's what we needed to know. Thank you.
All right. So let me go to the next poster. Same size, 70 by 100. And this poster, I took the exact same process of hand cutting and laser cutting. You can see the details. So what I did on this one, I hand cut the type. I mean, these are digitally morphed shapes of the typeface. I mean, I used the regular typeface and then I digitally morphed it to make it more liquid and softer also. So this is really screaming for something like hand-cut linoleum. So the shapes get really brown and weird. So this is perfect for hand carving. So I hand carved the black type first, printed the black type, then I hand carved the other type, but I hand carved the solid shapes of them. And I printed 2 hits of an opaque white. That does 2 things. One thing, it of course makes it white, and because I used 2 hits, it makes it really covering, but also it makes that surface really smooth and shiny already, because 2 hits of opaque white, that's already quite covering. And then I used the exact same block. So I just took that block out of the press and brought it to the laser cutter, and then I engraved the halftone structures into the linoleum. So again, I'm using both, and I'm showing you the block.
Oh, man.
So it's just let's say the white part of the block, or let's say now it's the black halftone dots. Let me try and grab the camera. And you can see the laser goes over, of course, the raised surface and also the stuff that I cut out, because the laser doesn't know where the image goes. And then let me show you the print. You can see the gloss because it has 2 hits of white and 1 hit of black with the halftones. That's not an impression that you're seeing there. That's just the ink that builds up. From a, let's say, from a reproduction standpoint, this is far from perfect, obviously. But from a design aspect and from a process aspect, this is really what fascinates me with a poster like this, is that I can use, again, the best of both. I use the laser cutter for the digital part of it, and I use the hand carving for the analog part of it. Then I'll go to the last one. That I'd just like to show you because it's quite a large one. Let me take the camera. Oops.
Hey, there we go. No, it's good.
Are we good? All right, so this is Weltformat. So it's 1 meter and 28 centimeters by 89.5 centimeters. So this is really, really big, of course, also for me. It's this is a manual cut again. So this is nothing, this is just traditional lino cutting. No secret there. But the point is, the press I'm using cannot print Weltformat, cannot print that whole size in one. The press I'm using can only print a little more than half of that. So what I'm doing here is I can print on that press half of it. No, like this. There we go. I can print half of this poster from the bottom, gripping the sheet on this edge. Print half of the sheet. I print this half X, and you can see maybe in the gloss that this is actually not an X, it is two V's connecting to an X. So this is one card with a tiny bit of overlapping, then I printed this type separately, and then I flipped the sheets around, and well, let me do it. I print the other half from the top. So I grab the sheets here, print until here, and probably print about that much. So it's 4 runs of lino cuts. All you see is a black poster. I mean, there's not much more than that, but it takes 4 runs to print that. I think I did 300 of these. And that is quite some work, because handling these large sheets, it takes some time. Also, large sheets like that, we cannot get, I mean, we could get white sheets that size, but we cannot get, for example, this pink paper in that size. So the producers don't make it, because the big poster companies that make that size, they only need white paper because they mostly print them digitally or in offset or in silkscreen. So to get that pink paper, I bought rolls of paper and I used a large board shear to trim them down. It takes, for the 300 sheets, it takes about a day to trim down the paper. Then I need to add a little bit of gripper at the top and at the bottom. So I need to trim them down to the final size after I printed them. It takes about maybe half a day. And then these posters get folded to an A4 size. So that took me another day just for folding these posters. So
there were a couple questions. Do you mind if I ask before you move
absolutely.
on? Okay, great. Yeah. So let's see. One of them was what lino, and I don't know if that's easy to share here or we could always share it later.
It's the regular artist lino. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you probably have the gray artist lino in the States that you get with whatever art supplies. And the stuff that we have here normally is brown, but it feels exactly the same because I've used the gray stuff in the States also. So it works with any lino basically. But what you have to be aware, maybe some of laser engraving companies would not enjoy you cutting lino that much on the laser. I use my own laser, so I have to make the decision about it because I mean, the smoke is not so bad, but there is just a lot of smoke happening while you do that. And maybe some companies would say, well, this put some dirt on, or whatever on the lens. So you have to find a service that says like, oh, it's okay to laser cut lino, but it's not really dangerous or weird, or it works just fine. But you have to find a service that does it for you.
Sweet. And then the other question was, oh, do you have ink lifting when you're piling on so much ink?
What is that?
Oh, so because and I think it was Bryce McLeod, if he wants to speak up, that's fine. But I think because you're doing like ink on top of ink on top of ink, is it lifting up any of the other ink you did before?
No. I mean, that's one thing that is really important, that it has to be dry. Also, if let's say, I can also do a double hit of white without even letting it dry between, and that works as well. But it is much more covering if you let them dry. So if I have the time, always do runs with little ink, not too much ink, is better than runs with a lot of ink. And I do let them dry between the runs. So also you want sharp edges when you print. I mean, basically you could say, well, I just add 3 times the amount of ink, but we know what happens. It will smear on the edges and it will not give you a nice print. So that's why I say you need to dry it and you use less ink when you print them.
Bryce, I saw you unmute. Was that what you were kind of asking about?
I've got a crying baby here. No, I think
it's real life.
I think the other part is, and hey Dafi, hey everybody.
Hey.
I love seeing you.
Yeah.
With I've noticed, like, when I get about like 6 layers of ink, if I don't do it right, the top layers, once it's all dry, will start actually scratching off. And so you're saying when you do it's a matter, like, if you're going with lighter layers and complete drying, that helps to alleviate that? Or have you ever experienced that yourself?
Not that much, but one thing that I say, use the speedy dry, because it makes the surface of your ink really hard. Also, you know, there's another effect. I don't know the word in English for that, but if you have like several prints and you stack them on top of each other when they're dry, and you rub 2 sheets against each other's, the black will transfer onto the other sheet. Yeah. And that will not happen if you use speedy dry and foil ink, are the 2 things that make sure that the surface of the ink is super hard. Yeah. It's not like crystals, because the crystals on the other ink, on the regular ink, is the thing that transfers to the next sheet if you rub them on each other's.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks. And I know you can't see me, but God bless you. I love you.
Yeah. So, should we go on with more?
Yes, I think it's time to go on with more. We can.
Oh yeah. So the next thing is, I've been working on. Well, I think I skipped that, but what I can tell you, I've also been working on tests with old ink that I'm really interested in. So these are inks from the 70s, and I'm working with a local ink manufacturer that is actually went bankrupt about 5 years ago, but the guy is still around and still mixing some weird stuff together. And I'm working with this guy, and he says he can still deliver the good old ink, because one thing that I also noticed, if you use process inks, if you use CMYK is of course never as opaque as letterpress inks used to be in the 70s, because CMYK for offset need to mix together, obviously. And I'm interested in very opaque colors. I mean, sometimes I can always add transparency if I want, but I'm interested in very intense colors and intense tones. So I'm talking to this guy, and he still has old stock of stuff in the basement. So he brings me a can of new old stuff every week, and I'm doing tests. That's what I'm doing here. So it's not only the new ink that is good, it's also the old ink that is good. But if I want something that dries fast, I would probably not go with the old ink. That's another thing. Then let me just quickly, and then I think we go to the printing show, but let me just quickly tell you a little bit of how the whole COVID-19 thing has affected me here at the studio. So, I mean, of course, we had the lockdown, and we can move freely again at this point. We don't know for how long, but right now it looks quite okay here. But there was a moment when I really lost all my jobs within a week. The summer program, the classes that I teach here in the summer, I had to cancel them. But the good thing is, I could also set up some new projects in that time. So I set up new art projects that I did. I did new projects for new clients that I found in these times. So I think there's always a way around it. I mean, the thing that really was affected the most was the summer program, and that is really takes me a lot of efforts, and I'm in the process of setting up a smaller European session this July. So that's another project that I've been working on. There was a lot of bureaucracy going on with filling out forms for whatever, for the government. And then the other interesting thing is that a lot of conferences went digital, and it's part of my business to go to conferences, to speak there, to find new people who are interested in doing the program, maybe find new teaching engagements, and that all went digital. And it's interesting because they ask, hey, can you make a video of about 40 minutes about your posters? And they're like, okay, yeah, I can try that. But it takes, and I did this, it took me 2 days with an assistant to make this 40-minute video. You need to rent professional equipment, you need a professional microphone, you need professional lighting, because you cannot just, like, what we're doing here is cool as a chat, but I don't want this, I mean, to be my presentation at a large conference in Moscow, for example. So that is one thing that I'm really hoping. It's just this weird year 2020 thing. And I really hope that conferences also see the advantage of interactions, of meeting people, because that is the reason why I go to conferences to speak, because of course I want to sell my work, but I also want to meet some people, set up new projects for the future. And that is something that really gets lost with digital conferences. So I'm really hoping at some point we can go back to real conversations and real conferences again.
We do too. Yeah, we're doing the Ways Goose as an Ways Goose this year. And it's a tough thing to do. We're going to miss everyone. And there was a lot of conversation about, was it the right thing to do or not? So I know everyone's missing everyone. And as much as this is great to see you all, I'd rather have you in the building, but we can't do that this year. So that makes us sad. And so if you don't know, Ways Goose for Hamilton this year is still the first week of November, but we're doing it all digitally. We'll have more information up July 1st. But Dafi, do you have any news about that?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a digital Ways Goose presentation this year. Yoo!
Which you're really excited about. So
I am really excited about it. So it's really I think the topic that I'm gonna be, because this year's Ways Goose is can we say it's more like an academic Ways Goose, maybe?
Well, we're partnering with the APHA, American Printing History Association. And so there is a really wonderful, the focus is still Ways Goose. That was the theme, because I know our Ways Goose normally doesn't have one, but they do. But yeah, the presentations might be I think there will still be a balance. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to be talking about my research. Can I say that, Stephanie, or is
you
it
can
still
say
secret?
whatever you want. No. Please tell people what you're going to be talking about.
All right. No, I'm going to be talking about my research I did on plastic type. So the type that's been produced in the 60s in Europe, that is basically poster type, but it was not produced from wood, it was produced from plastic. And I did research dissertation at the University of Reading for my research master's degree. And I researched this topic, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. And I think it really is a good topic to talk about digitally. So I'm really happy that this is the topic that we decided on for this Ways Goose. So that's really cool. Mm-hmm. All right. So I think we're going over to the printing show. So the Dafi Kühne printing show, for those of you who don't know, is a project that I did in 2018, where I on one hand, wanted to document some of the weird techniques that I'm working on, just like I showed you today. This is also going to be one episode, the digital and hand-cut linoleum. But the whole idea of the show is that I document the techniques, but I also share the techniques for people who want to learn something, for people who are teaching letterpress, so they can share the videos with their students. And so it's, for me, really a nice in-between, like, digital education, but you need to work physically if you want to reproduce that. And it should be, I want to say, the right amount of entertaining and the right amount of education. So the new season is just being released this Sunday, the first episode of the second season. Just after I wake up, I will stream the first episode of the second season. But tonight or today, you can see a short preview of the whole episode. So that's what we're doing now.
Great. So we're the first to see it. That's exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ooh, okay. So I'm going to share that right now.
Welcome to season 2 of the printing show. We're back, and I have some new black magic that we put on the printing press right now for you. So I get tons and tons of mail, people asking questions about my posters. Let's see. For example, this one. Miss Catherine D. from London. Dear Dafi, how do you do your weird brush strokes that you use on the SFG poster? Well, Catherine, I'll show you. So to get these brushstroke textures on the paper, I first need to get these brushstrokes on the printing block. Here I use a thin sheet of MDF, and what I apply to this is regular white glue. Just Elmer's glue, whatever you have. And then I use a brush to apply the glue onto the board. And then let this dry until the white glue is completely dried up and soaked in. But let's speed up the process a little bit here. Well, that's it. Now let's lock it up and print it. Well, that's our final result from our glue profile. What I did on this poster, I also cropped all the surroundings of the profile to get some very clean surfaces around the 3 letters SFG. Well, more black magic next week. And if you've got any more questions, send me a letter.
That was awesome.
All right.
Yes, that's a round of applause for everyone.
Woohoo! Hooray!
Hey, Rick.
Hey, I've got a question.
Yeah, sure.
How's my bandana look? No. No. My question is, when you're collaborating in music, how does that sort of paint a picture of your whole creative life? Like, I know that you make music, I know that you have a lot of different forms of output. You know, what is the story of your creative life, and how does that sort of take different tones and attitudes, and you know, what's that look like?
Well, I mean, one thing, yes, I do make music. I've played, I don't know, more than or between 100 and 150 shows in the last 10 years. So yes, I do that, but it doesn't have a big influence on my work. But that said, if you work for different kinds of bands, you need to have an understanding for rhythm, for how can you visualize techno music versus how can you visualize classical music. Because in my work, the content is always reflected in the way I treat the type. And that is very important. And I think, well, for me, it's just a natural thing to make music, because if you're interested in music, you make it. If you're interested in design, you make it. If you're interested in letterpress printing, you make it. And that's my attitude towards the mixing of different disciplines. But a lot of the people who like my posters might not even like my music. And a lot of the people who like my music might not even know that I design posters. And that's fine too. Does that answer your question, Rick?
Well, yeah, but my other question is that when you refer to the Franz Ferdinand, do you keep the article "the," or is it just Franz Ferdinand, the band?
Wait a second, I have a little present for you. Wait. Oh, there it is. There it is. All right. Can we have another person asking questions, please?
I think it's time for a tour.
Oh yeah, we can do a tour. Yeah, sure. All right. So again, the studio is quite big, but you have to be aware that we're on the second floor of an old building, and I had to spread out the weight. So every press that I placed in this studio, and let me switch around, every press that I placed in this studio, the physics came in and they said, oh no, this is too heavy, you have to move it here or there. So that's why one thing why I have a big studio, and also we're on the countryside, so the space is quite cheap. So this is the main entrance room if you come into my studio. And you can see that all the type is along the walls because of the weight. This is the main entrance. Here I have a little exposure room for photopolymers if I need them. Then here I have a little woodwork shop where I cut my own wood type on the pantograph. I trim all the stuff. I have a height, how do you call that, this thing? A block leveler, actually. That's the right word. So then we go, and here, most of the teaching happens here. Here I have a Ludlow. Here I have another press, a manual one. I don't use this press that often for my work, but I use it a lot for proving, and I also use it a lot for teaching. So I have 3 of these presses, exact the same model. The one you saw over there in the back or in the front, here, and I have another one in the back, the same model. So for teaching, this is perfect because I only have to give instructions for one press, and then they can work autonomously on the press. This is a little stop cylinder from the 50s. Here I have a laser. Then this is the second room with a medium-sized FHE. So this is about 90 centimeters in width. It's a press that grips the sheets on the long side, like most larger presses or all larger presses do. This press is from 1968. So it's quite new. Then I go to my office. This is my office, and this is where I started my studio. So this was my studio when I started, just this room. And then I expanded to the front, and now I expanded to the back there, which will go in a second. This is also an FHE press from this is from 1978. So you have to imagine that the presses we have here from 1978, that's really like brand new. It has everything you want. It has an adjustable bed. It has a security stop. It has a cylinder brush. Everything it has. I mean, this press is just very new. Then here's my office. I'm not going to go closer because it's quite a mess. And I thought I would build a platform when I came into this studio. I thought I would build a platform that would prevent me from going up with dirty hands. So dirty hands is down here, no inky hands up there. You can imagine how long that worked. So forget about that. Then this is the newest part of the studio, and it's not finished yet. Here I have a second entrance back there. And then I have a large graphics press from the 60s. That's the largest press I have. This is 1 meter and 14 centimeters. The press, and let me run it for you for a second. The press has pressure air, a compressor that blows the sheet onto the cylinder while printing, and it also helps with delivering the sheet. Let me put in one of these sheets. The air is not on right now. You would hear it, but it makes a lot of noise. So you can see this sheet is 1 meter wide, you see? And I still have a bit of play, so I can still print larger sheets than that. Okay. I mean, there's no form in there. There's no ink in there, of course. But let me just run it for you. And you can see the auto delivery. So I run it. And when I run the next sheet, this sheet will be delivered down here. You see this? I run it without a sheet, but you see it. And then it would print the next sheet. So while I'm printing, I'm pulling out this sheet. So this press weighs 3 metric tons. So to get it in, I had to rent a crane. The landlord made me this larger door. Let me open it. Well, the stairs were not here yet, but it came up from down there.
And
then
the size of that again? The press bed size?
The beds, or let's say, yeah, the printing format is 1 meter and 15 centimeters by 86 by 1 meter and 15.
Wow.
Then here I have a paper cutter. That's 2 tons as well. Then here for manual stuff. And back here I have a little gallery space that's not really in use right now. I mean, it is, but it's not finished. Also, you can see I'm building a little room there. So that's one of my next projects. I'm going to build a little residency space up here with a little bathroom and a tiny kitchen here. Yeah, that's the studio. So again, it sounds like, wow, it's crazy, it's big. I mean, 2 things that you have to be aware of. One thing, I've been working full-time in the studio for the last 11 years. It's not just I had a lot of money and I bought a huge studio and I bought all the equipment for a lot of money. that didn't happen. And the second thing that is really, really important to me is the stuff that I have here. Almost everything I got for free. If I had $200 at the end of the month, I would take a full cabinet of type for 200. If I didn't have the money, I said like, sorry, I can't take it. If the seller wanted more, I said like, I'm sorry, I can't pay you more. That's all I have. So it is really something that I'm a little careful if I'm showing people around, because right now I know it is big. It is really big.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space. I'm glad you gave us a tour. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And we're at the last, 5 or 10 minutes. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask out loud, please unmute and do that. That would be great. I think everyone's just picking their jaw up off the floor right now.
Dafi, what about artistic influences? Because your style sort of indicates to me that you like a lot of different approaches to art and artists. So I'm just sort of curious about formative stuff in your mind.
Mm-hmm. So one thing, when I was studying in Zurich, Swiss style, for example, was not a big thing that we talked about. Weingart was something we did not even talk about. So it is important. I thought when I was finished with studying, oh, Swiss style is over. It's been over for 50 years, and I have nothing to do with Swiss style, which is totally untrue. I mean, you can see in my work, there's a lot of Swissness to the way I'm working. But also, you can see that I'm trying to have fresh approaches technically, but even more important for me is I try to have fresh approaches graphically or typographically. So if you mention style, Jim, for me, style doesn't exist in my work. I'm not interested in applying the same style over and over again for different clients. I think this would be not fair to the clients. I am trying to reflect the content of the product, of the event, of the punk show, of the classical music show, whatever it is. I'm trying to reflect that in the visualization. And if people come to me and say like, hey, I really like this poster, can you do the same for me? I'm like, this is impossible because I have to develop the layout from the content. And that's the thing that I'm really interested in. So I see it as a huge compliment from you if you say, there's so many different styles. And I say, thanks, that's what I'm really trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Dafi, I would like to know if you've learned under any other printers in the area or in your travels.
Yeah.
How did you learn how to run all these crazy giant old presses?
well, that's two different stories. One thing, when I was a student, I did an internship with Hat Show Print in Nashville. So that was in 2008. I was an intern there, and I did have a little experience in printmaking or in letterpress printing, but there I really realized that something like a proof press can also be a production tool, because until then we would only use the proof press in our school to print like 10 prints, and that's it. But at Hatch, we would print 300 posters in 2 or 3 colors, and then realize, oh, this stuff really works for production. And that was fascinating to me. So, and if you ask me, who are the printers I learned from? I learned from every printer I had a discussion with. But also, at some point, I realized that a lot of the old printers, or some of the old printers, you have to prove yourself as a young guy. And I can't wait until I get my little gray hair here, so I don't have to prove myself anymore, because it's so exhausting if you meet a printer and you say, yeah, I'm a letterpress printer, and then they say, yeah, you young guys don't know what printing was. I'm like, wait a second. And not all of the old printers are like that, of course, and luckily not. But that's something that I can't wait to get over with. Yeah, and what was the second? Well, the second question is, how did you buy all this stuff? Again, in Switzerland, I think I'm one of the youngest still full-time letterpress printers. So there's no big scene here, and there has not been a big scene in the last 15 years. So it's really, for me, I just had to do it. And once the old guys realized, oh, this is the guy that you can sell the presses or give the presses to, then, well, they called their friends. We found a young guy. He will take your stuff for free. And they're like, oh, yeah, let's get this guy over here. So
That's hilarious. Now you have all these tons of equipment they're trying to give you. That's
right.
great. And then you have to pay for shipping and transport, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And it's not the same anymore. I mean, of course, prices are going up because people realize, and it's not that I got everything for free. Absolutely not. Because after you've set up, let's say, a good workshop, you are getting picky, and you say like, oh, okay, I'm gonna buy this press because it's better than the one that I have, but I need to kick out the one that I have. I mean. All right.
We're at 1, and I want to be respectful of Dafi's time because that was amazing. We really thank you so much for doing that. That was a wonderful tour, and we got to see your work. Seeing behind the scenes is always great, and I appreciate you always being willing to share so much. So thank you for that.